if you're going to do a short-term opt-out situation, you'd rather be hitting at Fenway Park than Wrigley Field. Even if the Cubs had offered $40 million a year with opt-outs, I think he would have chosen the Red Sox, where he has a good history of hitting there. I'd be lucky if Paul Sullivan from the Tribune wanted to have dinner with me. You think Jed wants to have dinner with me after losing out on a free agent that could put his team over the top? He wants nothing to do with me today.
Did he really lose out?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, Tom, because go back to the beginning of the offseason, you didn't hear Alex Bregman and the Cubs, attached to each other. I certainly didn't report on their interest. It came up late because they thought they might walk into a Bellinger situation where if Scott Boras didn't hear the longer-term deals that he wanted, maybe he'd come to the Cubs and they'd be willing to do something short-term. The only problem was, unlike last year, there was more competition for Bregman's services, and so all things being equal, he chooses the Red Sox. Of course, things weren't that equal because they're willing to pay him $40 million a year. But I will tell you, the Cubs could have gotten it done, but they just would have had to add a fifth or sixth year to the deal. I think he did find the Cubs interesting, Wrigley Field interesting, but they would have had to add that fifth or sixth year. And I tweeted this out in part because if you were going to do a short-term opt-out situation, you'd rather be hitting at Fenway Park than Wrigley Field. And Cody Bellinger is a great example. He didn't opt out because he didn't have the best year because it was a terrible year weather-wise. So the Red Sox, even if the Cubs had offered $40 million a year with opt-outs, I think he would have chosen the Red Sox, where he has a good history of hitting there. So,
but if you liked him, you would want to give him that, make him make that choice.
Yeah, exactly. But certainly a fifth or sixth year could have gotten it done. In the end, the most they would go would be 4 years, $115 million, and that was just nowhere close. But again, a month ago, I think they thought, okay, this could turn into a Bellinger situation by mid-February. But it really didn't because there was other competition.
What drives me crazy now, Jesse, is we were having this conversation with Abdallah and Carmen, and they're like, oh, you got to spend money if you're going to own a team, and you got to spend money. They were willing to spend money, and it's not that they were going cheap. They were willing to spend money. The money now is just it's crazy. There's always going to be one team that is going to really blow it open. And you can't always operate that way. And so to say that the Cubs are not spending the money, they are trying to, but they're not going to be that ridiculous, we're going to give an extra $10 million. It's a very funny game that they're playing now in baseball.
Well, yeah, but if you're a fan, Peggy, don't you want your team to be the one that gives the $10 million instead of coming up short?
I get it as a fan, but it's not fiscally responsible to do that always as an owner. It just you have to have limits at some point.
I am the guy that will say I see both sides, right? I'm a reporter. I understand.
That's easy, Jesse.
Both sides. Yeah, exactly. I understand both sides of the angle, but when you're repeatedly coming up short for the best players on the market, you can't be surprised when you're not making the playoffs for 5 straight years.
Yeah.
Or even if you get there, you're not the favorite. So I tweeted this out, like he's getting $40 million. It sounds like a lot, but that's the marketplace.
Right.
Like if someone, the marketplace determines how much you should get, not your stats even, right? Your stats.
It's whatever somebody wants to spend, really.
Yeah. So if you want the best player, and Jed wanted this player, not maybe in November 1st, but by the time January and February rolled around, he was interested, knowing this could really put them over the top. They're a quasi-playoff team now. Bregman could put them over the top on paper, has to perform like everyone else. And he came up short. He went to Tom Ricketts. He asked for that 5th year, maybe even that 6th year, and Tom said no. And this is something I've been reporting all offseason. They just don't want to commit too much past 2026 when the next CBA is up, and they're not willing to operate at a loss. You can define that however you want, but in their world, a payroll that exceeds the luxury tax probably puts them in a loss year in and year out, or whatever, for the aggregate over the aggregate the course of the year type of thing. So this is where they're at, where they have good players, but they only have really one great player right now, and Kyle Tucker, and that's for 1 year.
And so it's sounding like right now what's happening in baseball is it's just follow the money. Just follow the money. The romance Is that gone, or does it only belong to playing for the Yankees or playing for you're willing to take less money because the Dodgers are offering it to you and you know that they're going to be right there every year? It's like the romance is gone.
Well, I think most of the time players follow the money. Once in a while, a guy will let Corbin Burns sign with Arizona because he now lives full time in Scottsdale. I'm probably right near his house right now. So there are moments and times where players, take a little less, but most of the time their agents are offering them some big money. They take the best money deals. The union wants you to take the best money. Your agent does. Your wife does. Usually you take the most money. There are occasions where you don't, Peggy, but I'm not sure there's that much romance in professional sports in the first place, especially in an uncapped sport where anybody can offer you any amount. Yep. It just happens to be there are. Yeah,
that's where I was going, Jess, because wouldn't with the salary cap in mind, or a potential salary cap in the future when the collective bargaining issue is addressed, isn't this the time to spend before there's a salary cap?
If you're an agent, you certainly want them to. I think Tom Ricketts looks at it the opposite way. Why spend crazy right now when I'm not going to have to spend in a couple of years, or I'll have a ceiling where, if you were just wanting to win, yes. Yes, if you were just wanting to win,
goal? Isn't that the goal, Jess? You just said if it was just because you want to win. And the other thing I would say to you, Jess, and I've said this a bunch to you, and maybe I'm wrong, and if I am, please tell me so. The issue that I'm a Reds fan, and I'm already pissed off at my team because my team doesn't want to compete financially with the other teams in Major League Baseball. But the ratio is what kind of bothers me, Jess. Being in the third largest market, when they're third in revenue, approximately third in revenue, but yet they're 8, 9, 10, 11 in salaries. That ratio to me kind of doesn't function correctly, and would be the reason why, if I was a diehard fan, that I would be a little bit upset with them.
And I got to tell you, it's Jed Hoyer's last year. He came out and talked today. He didn't have to. They didn't sign him. He didn't have to say anything. But I think, and I sent out the video, I tweeted out, you could tell the frustration in Jed's voice.
He wanted Bregman.
Yes, he wanted Bregman. He wants the best players available.
Yeah.
Now, even he would say, I wasn't going to do that in 2022 or 2023. They weren't ready. And so you don't go to your owner back then and ask for money for the best player. But now I'm on the last year of my deal. You want me to make the playoffs. I want to make the playoffs in order to get a new account. But you're not giving me every resource possible when there's a player still out there in mid-February who plays a position that we don't have anybody at. They jettisoned 7 third basemen from last season. They have nobody. Now, their top prospect now has moved to that position, but he's still just a prospect playing a new position somewhat. He's been there about a year, but he's really a natural second baseman. He's 5'9", 5'9" guys. Altuve can hit 25, 30, but it's not a natural fit at the corner for Matt Shaw. We'll see what he does. So, I think there is some frustration in Jed Hoyer. I think he really tried to get the Ricketts family to okay this one, and they turned him down.
Jesse Rogers is brought to you by your Chicago Toyota Dealer Association. Toyota, let's go places. Jess, we have angst. We have angst with what's going on.
Sports angst.
We have sports angst with what's going on. And I think the expectations of fans are so high now because we're so frustrated. This has gone on too long. The rebuilds are taking too long. And it's like, wait a second, the Cubs just won. And all of a sudden it's like, wait, no, it wasn't just. It was 9 years ago. Yeah, it's crazy. It's taking too long for teams to stay competitive, and not just competitive, but at the top of the game.
Well, and to build on that, Jess, I guess I would go a step further and ask you, is the reluctance maybe from Tom Ricketts, and there may be a number of reasons, but remember when the son of Woody Johnson from the Jets basically was advising his dad based on Madden games? Numbers? Yeah. Is Tom Ricketts look at the PECOTA projections and sees that the Cubs are the decided favorite in the National League Central? It says, I don't need to spend $40 million a year on Bregman when I have a team that, by most people's standards, should win this division pretty handily.
Yeah, I think there's something to this idea. Maybe not looking at the projections, but I think there's something to this thought. I've given Jed enough money to compete in this division. The Dodgers aren't in this division.
Right.
The Yankees are not. The Mets are. So I think he thinks that. You have plenty. Remember, they paid that luxury tax last year. 9 teams paid it. 6 made the playoffs. The Cubs are one of 3 that did not. So you don't think that sticks out to Tom Ricketts? I already paid this extra tax, and I got screwed once on it. I don't want to pay that again unless you're guaranteeing me something. But, of course, Jed probably tried to say, hey, this puts us over the top. So I think there's something to that. You've got a good payroll in a division that is very winnable. So go win it. Go win it. Stop asking me for more money. It's like my kids. Stop asking me for more money. I've given you enough allowance.
With no disrespect meant, Jess. Your bankroll isn't $5 billion.
No disrespect taken,
Okay.
and I'm with you. But he will tell you, again, he mentioned breaking even at the convention. I've written many times, not many times, but several times about since COVID. It's just different there. The bottom line is watch. Marquis, not the cash cow. Like all these things.
Right.
It's different than last decade when they won it. He was more willing to push those chips in, and they haven't since then. But it's that sort of in between. They're not pushing the chips all in, but they do think they have enough to win from the ownership standpoint.
But a lot has changed, you're right, in the last 10 years when they first got into it. I think they knew what they were going to have to do. And now there's all these, trying to keep up with the Joneses is a lot more expensive than I think. I mean, and it's one thing you guys say, salaries go up. Of course, we know. We get that. But it just seems like everything has gone up, and it's just to crazy numbers now. So, yeah, maybe there is a little bit of, this isn't the same game we got into 10 years ago.
And that's a good point because the landscape has changed. And the landscape, if you're trying to run a professional franchise on a year-to-year basis, having to turn a profit to make all your payments, otherwise you could go bankrupt, then you need to get in a different business because the vast majority of your wealth is going to come from the appreciation of the team itself. So I think, Jess, what it does is it gives you some leeway and it gives you some cushion. If, in fact, you do lose some money this year and next year, you know that if and when you have to sell, that you bought it for $800 million, it's worth $5 billion. You're going to make money on the way out if, in fact, that's the path you take. And that wasn't the case 15 years ago.
Yeah, and that's Steve Cohen's attitude right now, the Mets owner. He will operate at a loss on a yearly basis. I think he would do that just to win anyway,
right.
But he knows the investment will pay off down the line.
Right.
I don't think Tom will do that, and everyone wants to debate whether they actually operate at a loss. I don't think, fans are completely right when they say, they have all the money in the world. It's not that. Like Tommy, every business has budgets and things like that.
Yep.
And, if it was limitless, they'd be spending it, right? You know what I mean? If the revenues were limitless or whatever the way fans think, they'd be spending it. There are constraints, but I think you're right. Think of Jerry and Tom Ricketts. I could see them in this discussion saying, we haven't changed. The sport has changed. But it is incumbent on you as owners to change with the sport. Mm-hmm. And if not, as you just said, Tommy, maybe get out. Get out.
Is the fact that they were willing to go over their budget for Bregman a good sign that they may be willing to meet whatever the cost would be for an extension after this year for Tucker?
No, I don't think so. I think it helps that they save that money, but I think every case is different. In other words, just using today as an example, Jed quickly pointed out the savings on Bregman doesn't go to somebody else that's available out there necessarily, or even to the July trading period. That was an exception. Tanner Scott, the guy, a reliever they went after was an exception. They didn't take that money and get the next best reliever and spend it. They went and traded for Presley, who cost less. So I wish the Bregman savings meant Tucker has more money. On paper, I guess it's possible, because how can you you can't sign everybody. So not signing one does make the other one a little bit more interesting, but it's not a guarantee. They're not taking that because, again, that was an exception to their budget that Ricketts ultimately turned down. So let's just see what it looks like a year from now. I still have my doubts. I think he is kind of waiting past 26 when the next CBA will be signed, maybe a salary cap. But you never know. You never know. If Tucker is willing to play some ball, little hometown discount, there might be something there. But if it's some crazy Juan Soto number, no chance.